On today's episode, we look at the type 2, the giver and the helper. And we have our resident expert, Dr. Tio, with us to tell us more. Let's listen in to our interview with Dr. Jeff Tio. So today we are looking at the type 2, the type 2. So what can you tell us about the type 2 and the triad that they exist within?
Sure. Type 2s are very loving person. Their strength is actually to connect with others. They are very compassionate. They're known to be helper because they live in a relationship that actually inspired by a strong and deep reciprocal relationship. They would like to see their own beauty through the eyes of others. Other people's eyes are good mirror to see their own reflection. And how do you do that? Is by using their own gift and doing a lot of good things, giving, helping, caring. And when you see yourself from the eyes of others, that you have this wonderful gifts and abilities, it's a good source of information to actually build your integrity, your value, your worth. The reason for that is because a type 2 is also having difficulty in introspecting and facing the mirror and just looking at their own set of eyes and say, is there anything good in me? And they can try their best, but it's not enough. The belief is maybe there is something that is good in me if someone would tell me. So then the outside information would be very, very useful to formulate this wonderful information that they need to build up their worth and their value and their integrity.
So in light of that, what caused this? What was the wounding message that they heard or that allowed them to believe that, or to ask the question, is there any good in me? I mean, is there something that potentially occurred?
Sure.
I heard messaging that they heard to believe that.
Well, we were talking about the three areas, faith, hope, and love as the foundation of this in 1 Corinthians 13. The one's ability to connect, which is love, and one's ability to actually see their own totality and their own integrity and value from a head perspective. That's one's ability to trust self and others. And then a person's ability to measure their significance and to measure if they matter in this world, to measure if they are going to cause some change to make the world a better place. Now, this is something, all of these three areas are actually places of our own insecurity as well as gifts. For a type 2, that not feeling good enough, which is also shared by other types, is focused on, I'm not good enough in terms of valuation of my own integrity and having difficulty appreciating who am I as in terms of my worth. So when you use the head, we talk about 8. They use their heart to measure if they're lovable enough, and they fall short in that. The 2, they use their head to measure if they are worthy enough. And then they process information. Information coming from within is not enough. So they need information from coming from without, the external. So their woundedness is in the area of trusting oneself. Now, it could be a very vulnerable place growing up, but even from an unconscious space or place when they were actually in their formation process as children, maybe even as a toddler or as a baby, when they get the message of I am valued, I'm worthy. But if the message they're getting from their care providers is actually, no, you're not, you know, either by abandonment, by being ignored, by reciprocating mistrust to the trust that they're giving as a child. For example, growing up, if they tend to believe, many of us actually, one way or another, have been bullied or experienced these painful words, even from our care providers. If our care providers would say, "You're dumb, you're stupid enough, you're not going to amount to anything," they tend to believe that. So that wounding, it wounds their own relationship with self. So they no longer trust the information that's coming from self that they are good enough, because an external force has been, occupying that kind of lens that they need to see, they need to use to see who they are. So that's why it is important for them to actually feel it and hear it from others, that they are good enough. That's how they build their integrity back.
Okay. Well, thank you for that a bit of information. Now, when we look at this from the spiritual sense, what sin or what spiritual sin would you say type 2s are connected to? I know, for instance, last week we looked at the type 1, which is anger, the type 9, which was sloth. What sin would you say that is connected to the type 2?
Okay, the pendulum swings back and forth. I think type 2s are the most humble people that you would see, because humility falls, under these big umbrella of virtue. Because humility is a form of being good, as well as being helpful, as long as being caring and compassionate. But just like being helpful, just like the rest, it could be also a source of pride. Because the pendulum swings from one end to the other. On one end, they don't feel like they are not good enough. So they tend to get that information from others. How? By doing good, by helping, by making people happy, by saying yes to everyone. They are pleasers. But if they don't actually get that, consciously or unconsciously, they would say, "No, I'm not like that," But sometimes they would realize that the motivation is expressed through possessiveness. I've been doing this to you, so therefore you are mine, in terms of you are here to sustain what I need. All you have to do is say thank you, or, give me these eyes that says you are a good person. And that feeds this feeling of, I'm really actually a good person. When the pendulum hits the other extreme, when they're getting frustrated that they are not getting this information from others, then the sin would show up. The sin that would say, "How dare you not do this? I've been doing this to you. Don't you see I'm good? Don't you see I'm," that's when the sin of pride for a type 2 would come out. They are the most humble people. But in times of crisis, when they need this information to help them, in building themselves up, and they don't get that, then, hysteria is one of the, you were asking about the triad here.
Yeah.
The disintegration of 2, they go to actually, to 8. The strength of 8 can be seen in 2, especially when they fail to actually get what they need, or where they get frustrated and disappointed that they are not getting, the thing that they thought would be achieved by being nice and being good and being. But it takes a long time before that frustration would sip in, and then they feel like this is too much, and then the hysteria is going to come out. The expression of frustration, and just like an 8 taking that power and that energy. Now, integration goes to a 4. The individuality of a 4, the 4 who's quite sensitive with knowing what they need and who they are. Because 2 always lives outside themselves in terms of they don't want to recognize their own feelings.
Wow.
Because they value other people's feelings. So if they say something bad, two kind of pain. One is ignore their own pain. Because how dare you step on my toes, for example? That's also stepping on a person's ego, for example. So if they have expressed that kind of anger, and then they realize that, but I'm not that valued enough to actually express such kind of emotion. They are more valued than me. Then that kind of cycle. They beat themselves up for being not good enough or not virtuous enough, because again, they protect that image of being good. So the cycle actually kicks in.
Thank you. So we see. So what I'm hearing is that when they disintegrate, they take on those qualities of the type 8. When they integrate, they take on the qualities of the type 4, and we know that they have the wings of a 3 and a 1. How does that play into a 2? Do they then become, in terms of becoming a performer or a perfectionist? How does that weigh in on that, the helper giver?
Sure. Okay, before I go to the wing and of 1 and 3, let me just complete my thought on the 4 here, because the gift of a 4 for a 2 in their integration is, again, and I'd like to emphasize this because 2 is struggling with this. It's very hard for 2 to hear their own cry, to recognize their own tears. They are weepy. They are actually vulnerable, but they always put their feelings last and others' feelings first. Now, the type 4 here would teach them how to actually value who they are so that they don't have to depend on others. So that's very important for a type 2. Now, the wings, this wing, it's by the way, I don't know if you have covered this. It's wonderfully, I think, structured. The reason why it's wing is this is how you soar, So if you are a 2 and your wing is 1 and 3, this is actually what will get you to a certain place that you never imagined, because your wings will help you get there. And sometimes you lean on one end to the other. So these experiences, they are not actually seen in the context of integration and disintegration. You experience them almost every day in your life, because this is how you glide. Sometimes you're leaning on one or the other. For example, a 2 who's leaning more on the 1 wing, okay, they are a good person, and yet at the same time they value the standard. So this is a good person who values the standard. They can go far in terms of the helper type and the reformer type, or the teacher type. They would protect, a 2 would protect the standard, especially if the standard in their own interpretation would mean protecting relationships. Now, a 2 who is leaning on the wing 3, which is the performance, this is a 2 who is quite ambitious, just like a 3 who values success. But in terms, again, the relationship is always there, because what they are protecting is the information that they can get from relationship. Unlike 3 doesn't mind if the relationship is broken, as long as people sees their value through their success. But a 2, it's not actually because they're looking for a more kind of attention from others when they are successful. What they're looking for actually is to sustain the kind of information that they can find inside. enough to build themselves as someone who has integrity, someone who has value, and someone who has worth. So the motivation is what's the key here. If you'd like to understand your own type, it's not only on behavior, because a type 2 with a wing 3 may look like a 3, or if a type 2 with a wing 1 may look like a 1. It goes back to the motivation. Is your need, expressed in your relationship with others, because that's something that you can find inside of you. Unlike one, they build something inside of them so that they don't have to depend on others. Same thing with 3. That's a big difference. But a 2, they always depend on what they can get from others, because that's something that they lack. It's inside of them.
Wow. So that being said, how can others best support or encourage a 2 to be their best self? Well, what can people in relationships or people who know 2, what can they do to help them grow?
Sure. It is very hard for 2 to be on the receiving end, because it goes against this idea of, I will be valued if I am the one who's helping. I'm the one who's giving. I'm the one who's teaching, because that's being good, and therefore that's how I get information from others, the compliments that I get, because I do these good things. So what would it look like if I sit on the receiving end? So if you are in a relationship with a type 2, you allow that person actually to find his or her place in a receiving end, where he doesn't or she doesn't have to resist, to just embrace that kind of process. They can be vulnerable because they are very compassionate, but not in the context of, sometimes it feels like it's almost shameful to be on the receiving end, and this is where the pride would come in. That's why their tendency, the favorite sin, is actually pride. It's because being a recipient or in the receiving end would mean loss of value, loss of worth. Do I really want to be in this kind of position? But if you are helping a 2 or in a relationship with a 2, allowing them to fully embrace that without condemnation. Okay, be generous in giving your compliments to 2, because they like that, but they don't like it when you give it for the sake of giving it, because they have a very sensitive heart if you're looking for information outside of you, you'd like to have authentic information. Okay, they don't like information given for the sake of just being given. They need authentic information because they don't have that inside. But at the same time, when you compliment a 2, you don't actually always you don't engage in a codependent relationship. A type 2 tends to be a yes person and forgetting about boundaries, especially in providing care for self, because again, they're always thinking of other people. Because that is the source of what they're looking for in terms of their self-worth is concerned. So if you are in a relationship with 2, remind them that they are also, it's also important to provide self-care. It's also important for them to listen to their own emotions, to their own tears, and to their own cry. Give them that space and allow them to be vulnerable, and help them to be comfortable in being on the receiving end.
Wow, that's awesome. In other words, there's a 2-letter word that they need to remember it's okay to say, that we can find in the dictionary, and that word is no.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay for them to say no in order for them to give the care that they need to to themselves. So I thank you so much for that. And hopefully those who are 2 and those who know someone who's a 2 have learned a lot today about them, so that you can help them in their journey towards a better self, and also in help having them receiving that grace that they need to love themselves a little bit more, so that they can be a better gift to humanity. So thank you so much, Dr. Jeff, for that overview on the type 2.
You're very much welcome.